Oh, Pepper Stetler.
Hi, Ashley Barlow.
I did not tell you. I usually do the little intro thing on my own. If I do one, sometimes I don't even do one. Um, so that was a little short hello, but I'm so happy you're here. I have wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time, and I'm so happy that now you're here and we're going to talk about your amazing book. Oh my gosh, Pepper, I'm so proud of you. Dice, the book is called A Measure of Intelligence, One Mother's Reckoning with the IQ Test. A hot topic here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here and get the chance to talk with you.
Yeah. And we're friends, which I just totally love and make me even more proud of you and grateful for the important work that you've done. Why don't we start out by having you give a little bit of an introduction about yourself? I love your introduction of yourself in the book, although I don't think you're nerdy. And you describe
Oh,
yourself
come on.
as culinary.
No, come on. No, come on. I'm an art history professor. I'm pretty nerdy. But
But you might find a nerdy then. I like nerds, so maybe
yes. Yeah, sure.
okay. I was
What you want to call it, I guess. But yes. So um thank you for having me on. And maybe a good way to start would just be to kind of start with why I wrote the book and how the idea kind of got planted in my head to write the book. So it starts with the story that I began the book with, which is that my daughter Louisa has Down syndrome, and we were called to her first IEP meeting before she started kindergarten. So I was a real newbie to this IEP meeting thing, which now I feel like a little bit more of a steeled veteran at how these go. But at that point, we go to this meeting, and as I'm sure many of your listeners know, I'm kind of presented with this IEP, an individualized education program. And part of that, of course, is, goals and accommodations to help her out in a classroom with her peers, but also this kind of report from a cognitive assessment, which involves um, IQ tests. And, I'm sure I signed a form that said that this was okay to do, but I don't really remember that part of it. And I never really thought about what was going on here until this meeting when the results were presented to my husband Andrew and I. And it was just, I don't know, there was a lot of confusion, I felt. I was confused about what these tests were for. They seemed a cognitive test to me just kind of seemed serious in a way, but then I was getting all of these messages about how, you know, they're not that important, they don't matter that much, it's not a big deal. Um but then, they seemed to be kind of essential to qualifying her for services in her IEP, so they did seem to matter, and it seemed to matter to me that, she was gonna have this number associated with her, abilities for the rest of her life, and I don't have to have that. I'm not labeled by a number, um and that seemed like a great privilege that my daughter wasn't gonna get to have. Um, and all sorts of things started kind of coming up for me and in psychology journals and understand more how psychologists are thinking about this test. I knew at that meeting I knew a little bit about the history of IQ tests in eugenics in the early 20th century, but I didn't know a lot about that yet. And I certainly didn't think all psychologists now were eugenicists or something like that. So I was just thinking how is this jiving? We're still giving IQ tests, but these people don't seem to be using it in the same ways they did in the early 20th century. So I kind of had questions about that, and that's kind of where this all started and why an art historian by profession ended up researching IQ tests.
Well, isn't that what we do as moms, right? Like, I always say it's such a gift to get to go on those deep dives. I've gone on deep dives about the weirdest things, acid reflux, inflammation, the weirdest things. And it's like sometimes we have like almost a visceral thing, but I think what you're describing, I get in a lot of business management stuff because I was an education major. And so I don't know about taxes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel inadequate. I feel like I don't know what they're talking about and that's unfamiliar because you're smart and you literally work in academia. Um, and so you got this number and you're like, I didn't even know we were doing this. And that's a foreign feeling. And I wonder if it came from that.
Yeah, it did. I did. I agree with that. And also this sense of yeah, like frustration and annoyance that I didn't understand what was going on. And I felt like I was just supposed to nod and say, okay, um, without really understanding it. I mean, and I realized after doing some research that like I understand and think about IQ tests in a way that is way different than psychologists do. Like that is like,
Yes.
not one thing that this book is doing. I'm not trying to kind of pretend I'm a psychologist. Um, but I just I wanted to not feel like I necessarily had to agree with all of this and just kind of nod my head and go on with it. And I was I think also a bit annoyed by the authority of it all. I was annoyed, I think, by because I'm in the humanities and an art history professor. I was annoyed by this kind of, knee-jerk power that numbers seem to have over us, how we assume numbers are objective and not swayed and informed by power and historical forces and human choice, um, in which, in fact, they are, and I'm not some sort of, like, anti-science person, but I also think that science is something that is also affected by history and by human choice. And I was annoyed by the way in which there was this authority um, that I didn't really agree with, and I didn't agree with the power that it had over me. So that was like another part of it is I had to kind of reconcile with the fact that this even though I didn't really I was quite suspicious of the IQ test and I wasn't I wanted to learn more about it. I still realized that like it has a power over me too. Like the school psychologist said in that meeting like, well, Louisa's IQ is low as we would expect for someone with Down syndrome, but it's actually high for a kid with Down syndrome, and I had to kind of, realize that at that moment, the feeling I had inside myself was like, "Yes," like I had done something right, I guess, as a parent, or my sense of identity was sort of deeply caught up in my kid's IQ, which is ridiculous, but I also think, like, important to admit that lots of decisions and ideas we have about intelligence and our children's intelligence are wrapped up in how we feel about our own identity and where we want our kids to belong and things like that.
Gosh, I couldn't agree with you anymore. And I think that's the key. Like we actually started down this path before we hit record, and I was like, no, 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 let's hit record. My joke is now that I have a teenager, and we're talking about things like, can they stay out until 2:30 in the morning the night after prom, and like real like dangers of the world. I always tease to our friends that we gave them BPA free bottles, and we used to think that like the hardest thing in the world was folding that stupid stroller. And now I'm like, the world is so stressful.
Yeah.
Surely they'll be fine because, we put them on their backs to go to sleep. So everything should be okay, guys. Oh, But I think so. Okay, so we were talking about that, and he said, like Jack's IQ comes out super low when we test him. And in fact, I want to talk about the study that Cincinnati Children's is doing. But when school tested Jack, it was super low, and I had school agree before we tested him that. And this is what I recommend to people all the time. I honestly think that you can get good information from an IQ test sometimes because you can get relative strength and relative weaknesses.
Yep, that's true.
Example, like Jack's formal reasoning is consistently good. And he actually scores like inside the rubric in all state testing for math. He is terrible at math and he hates math. I hope he can't hear me through the door. But at his age still, this will start to change. At his age, math is really formal reasoning. And he is speculative, and if he likes it and he's got buy-in, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
And so his math score is a reflection of his formal reasoning, which is really cool. I also have high math scores and I'm terrible at math for the same reason. Is that genetic or is that a component to Down syndrome, whatever? I think that's fascinating. Yeah. You said, like, well, just the fact that you were, like, curious and irritated by his score, means something. And I completely agree. But for me, I buck the system. I'm a system bucker all of the time. Like, I'm like, well, that doesn't mean anything, and here's how I can get around it. So I stopped caring about the score, and I started caring about how I could get around it with the special education system,
Oh, great.
You were very curious about the score and, like, dove in. And I so appreciate that we both have, like, I've got this, like, super practical sense to it, and you've got this super, like, heady research sense to it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear more about how you're beating the system here because, like, this is something, um, I have found, and I write about in the book is that, like, there's a real bind about the IQ qualification, of the diagnosis for intellectual disability, right? So, like, the IQ, just so your listeners know, the kind of intellectual cognitive assessment part that the IQ test usually takes care of is like one of three aspects of the diagnosis of intellectual disability. So it's not the whole diagnosis again. It's not
Right.
everything.
But
But
the
it's
adaptive role.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, in order to, get the services that Louisa needs in school, in order to, say, get Medicaid later in her life, in order to, say, for maybe qualify for a higher education program for people with intellectual disabilities, she has to have an IQ test, and it has to be below a certain level. Um, and so in that way, kind of like to be able to access all of these things,
Yeah.
I have to kind of let the rules play out. I feel like no matter how I feel about IQ tests, because I'm not willing to take the risk of like taking her entirely off the grid.
Right. Agree. And some people do. And I think that is extreme because I agree with you that we need services, when they're 18 or 22 or whenever they're out on K to 12 education or secondary education, they're going to need government benefits. She's going to probably really benefit from a job coach, and she's going to be as integrated into her community as possible with things like job coaching. She might need day programming. She might need housekeeping. She might need financial management, personal care, and she's got to qualify for those things. So what I think from a practical standpoint is that so I have IEP teams agree that IQ tests are not indicators of general aptitude for people with IDDs. There is no research that says that, but I say you're allowed to rely on your professional judgment. And so can we agree that that is true? Most of the time I can get them to agree. I also have them agree before we do testing. A lot of districts don't require testing, period. They'll say, yes, we'll consider a different eligibility category. And to back up, as you said, in order to qualify for special education under IDEA, you have to be eligible for one of the 13 disability categories. At the federal level, states can have more, and they can tease them out. So Kentucky has two subsets of intellectual disability, for example. So then the other thing I have them do is say, no matter what the score is, it is not going to drive placement under the regulation 300.116. And so, and that's true. I mean, that's what the reg says.
Yeah.
And so then once they agree to that, then the number doesn't mean anything for special education. It means something for eligibility. So then check, we're eligible, check, we get academic goals. Let's move on.
Okay.
Kind of take the value out of the score before we get the score. The score doesn't have value, period.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, and that might be a good, I think, path forward, right? Like something I've suggested in my book is I don't think IQ tests are going away. I've talked to enough psychologists to realize that they're very IQ tests are very entrenched in the kind of study and training of psychology. But they can be minimized, right? Like the importance of them can be minimized. And another thing, however, that I again, moving away from the practical to the more I guess social is, I mean, another thing I realized is that whether or not I have Louisa's IQ continue to be tested, the kinds of ways of thinking about intelligence in our broader society that judge her abilities and opportunities by her intelligence and how we think about intelligence are still going to be there, right? So this system has created a lot of assumptions about what somebody with a low IQ can or cannot do. Even if you, and then obviously, even if you don't know Louisa or Jack's IQ, you look at them and make sort of assumptions about their abilities.
Yeah.
And those are still going to be there, right? Like that kind of more general, ingrained social way that we think of intelligence is going to be there, whether I allow Louisa to take an IQ test or not. I mean, and there's so many ways now where I notice how testing, in more generally, like testing of standardized tests of college admissions tests and so many things about this world are set up to judge people and identify their detriment, right? Identify how they're not able, how they're different from normal, how they have some sort of deficit. And that's really the more general thing that stinks about the legacy of these tests is that, even if I would not have Louisa's IQ tested, I would probably still have to walk into IEP meetings and listen to, what's different about her. What are her deficits? Other things would be measured about her and quantified and put into her IEP because it's a kind of method of thinking about intelligence and thinking about functioning that originated in IQ testing in the early.
Well, and that's why I like to shift the narrative, right? Like I like to go into an IQ gosh, that one time I was flipping through because I had something highlighted, I couldn't find it, and I just found it. So, but I like to go into IEP meeting and with the narrative to really focus on her. Like, what is my future plan as her mom, the general contractor of home and community? You guys are the general contractors of school. I have 2/3 of her environment. You have a third. And I also am going to be the general contractor of her future. Knowing that she also is even if you're able to do a supported decision-making plan and she's her own guardian, you will undoubtedly be part of her team. I know this because we're friends. And so what are our long-term goals and how do we get there? And then we are looking at a deficit-based IEP. We're looking at what foundational skills do we need to get in order to get a job at a coffee shop, in order to get a job at P&G, in order to get this. And that's why I think it's so important that parents know that we know what it is so that we aren't just looking at the deficits, right? The other thing that I used to love to do in the developmental profiles, and once they're transition aged, transition testing does this too, is it does look at his skill set. Remember when like she would take the Battelle with her Help Me Grow people or like whatever the developmental profile, there's some four letters like PPDI or something. I don't
I
remember.
remember Battelle. Yeah.
Yeah. And it would be like, is she, well, like the easiest one is she coming to midline? Is she reaching away from midline? Is she crossing midline? Well, like we would just look at what's next. So I would say, yes, he's got that. Nope, that's emerging. And then no, he doesn't have that. So we would stop at emerging. And I just always say, what's the next skill? What do we need next? So like in reading, we don't have a developmental reading profile, but Jack Ball is an Orton Gillingham curriculum. And I'm always just like, well, where do we think he can be next? Within 12 months, where do we think he can be next? Let's set that as the goal, because then we have to get all these skills that lead up to that. So I'm like, okay, if you can get through 36 weeks worth of lessons with like a kid with dyslexia, maybe you can get through 20 with Jack because you have to spiral more and you know, it takes longer. He needs a lot of repetition. So let's look at the 20th skill from now. Let's make that our goal.
Yeah.
And then we work through the curriculum to get there. I'm like, well, I can bake the system. That's what attorneys do, right? Like we think our
But then you still have the language of the IEP that has to kind of define a deficit, right?
like you have to swallow that pill.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very deficit based. Which okay, so this is what I wanted to say. This is page 91 of the book of the hardback copy that's currently for sale. And it says, okay, so you're in a handbook by the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, and there's a chapter about people with IDDs who have relatively high IQs, which is our Louisa. And it says the handbook states that references to a mild or high functioning disability can often be misleading. Real life challenges can be equal to and sometimes greater than those with IQs. And my note here is I actually disagree with this because for Down syndrome, because most adults that I know who are doing this life skill, real life challenge stuff, had incredible EQ.
Yeah.
Their emotional intelligence is so great. And I theorize, just this is like my soul theorizing, with a brain that can do it. But like on a molecular soulful level, I feel like it's because they aren't competing for intelligence. My adult friends with Down syndrome connect with my body and my person. They don't connect with me as intelligently. We aren't competing for how many quotes we remember from the Disney movie. We are competing for where we've been.
You don't do that with any of your friends, actually.
I feel like, well, I don't because I don't care about that stuff. I'm like, hey, can you do a cartwheel? I can do a cartwheel.
Yeah.
But like, you know, we use vocabulary. We pretend like we know about why, whatever it is. And my friends Down syndrome are like, hey, you're good. I like you. You're my friend.
Yeah.
Like this soulful connection. I mean, we know they have high EQs. There's all kinds of research to show that they have high EQ. But again, it's in my system.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and you're totally right. And I would, I'm thinking of Louisa when you're describing your friends for sure. I mean, she fits right into that kind of personality. So, like, yes, I get asked this all the time. Like, well, aren't there other kinds of intelligences? And it's like, sure, there are, but those don't hold the kind of power in our society like the full scale intelligence quotient test has, you know, that number has done. And so like, I feel like we if we just turn to emotional intelligence, um, then it's not really getting at the point. And also, there's all sorts of ways of being in the world. There are people that might have low IQs and have like very little EQ as well, like not a lot of social skills and not feel comfortable with other people. And the thing I think what I just came down to is maybe we should stop measuring us everyone. Like, maybe we should try to just accept everybody for how they are and realize everybody has gifts to bring to the table here. And we should not, I feel like a measurement of something is always there's an implied drive to improve that, right? Like, why measure if you're not going to try to change it?
Right. Right.
And this is something I get frustrated with all the time in Louisa's IEP meetings is they're measuring things and it's like, well, what am like all you're doing is just proving that she has a problem with this, and we
Right.
know that she has a problem doing this. So why do we need to quantify it except if you're trying to like punch me in the face with the number
Yeah.
to
I feel
tell me
that
that
about
she's
behavior all the time. I'm like, listen, when he was in preschool, I'm like, I walked in the classroom. I'm like, that fish is going to die. You're going to have to be more quiet. And if you want blah, blah, blah to survive, you're going to have to move it up 10 feet. Like, Jack has behaviors. And they used to email me all the time with behaviors that the principal would call. And I'm like, I don't need to know that he pulled somebody's hair. He pulls somebody's hair 100% of the times that he's in the community. He's a 3-year-old boy that doesn't have communication and he wants to tell people he likes them. So he pulled there. We're working on it.
Yeah,
But if you want to start collecting data on what happens before and what happens after, and call me once you have a pattern established, that's the kind of information I want. At the moment, I'm exploring what is happening when he's pulling hair and what does he need. So, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, and I think that's it. Like, so that was so beautiful what you just said. This experience, to me, has shaped my life, my values. I don't value that stuff anymore. I mean, how could I call it my bullshit radar, right? Like, if you're good to Jack and you appreciate Jack for who he is, you're a good person. If you don't, I used to feel like it's really easy to feel like then you're a bad person. But it's really like your values don't align. You value other things, and that's okay too. It's just right now I don't have time for that because I'm like about to get booby trapped with a rope for the 18th time today.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I mean, I also worry about coming off as sounding like I accept Louisa for who she is at all times, and I have adopted and achieved some sort of Zen-like sense of acceptance, right? Which is not the case. Like I struggle with this a lot, and that's a kind of tension that I wanted to be in the book as well, right? Like
It is.
I accept who she is, and I love her more than anything else in the world, and I think she is incredible. And yes, I still get like frustrated when I cannot get her like to get ready for school on time.
Yeah.
You know,
But like, okay, so our goal is to get ready faster. But I mean, we do that with typical kids too. We do that with our partners. We do that with our parents. And, I mean, we are a growth mindset oriented people. So we're going to continue to do that. I wonder, like, my big question then is, looking back, how would you approach the idea of IQ testing differently? And what perspective do you think parents should take in dealing with the testing themselves?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I could do anything differently. I guess I would say give yourself be aware of how you're responding to it, and treat those things seriously, and try to be inquisitive about the kinds of emotions and responses that emerge when you're having these kinds of conversations that, by the way, we're the ones that have to have these conversations, not oth- other parents. 'Cause-
Right.
So, just like shout out of solidarity there, because they're not fun at all to have. But
Well,
like,
you took one.
yeah, I did, but I didn't learn my IQ. I didn't want to, and then I took it with a grad student that was practicing.
Yeah.
And plus, like, I wanted to be able to take notes and kind of go off script and be
I
kind of
like
meta about it while I was taking the IQ test, so
I like your description of how like you would take a note and you could tell he was like, what do I say next?
I mean, that was this moment where I was like, "I have enough authority in this situation as him." I didn't wanna feel like this subject,
Yeah.
and he was, studying. Um
Yeah. So I actually my question relative to that is paperclip to the question about the children's study. So um Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center has an NIH grant. It's an NIH grant, right? Okay.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think so too. We participated in it. You all participated in it. And the way that I think it's described is basically they're testing the test. They're trying to determine how to best get an indication of general aptitude or IQ for people with intellectual and developmental disability. Is it specific Down syndrome?
Uh, I do believe that the one that Louisa took is specific to Down syndrome.
Okay. I
I
think
I
I
think
think it
it was
was too.
about, the specific, like, learning profile of kids with Down syndrome and whether that, like, shows up on an IQ test accurately.
Okay.
I
So
believe I believe so.
what what the psychologist said to me about that was that part of the problem is the standardization of the test. So, like on the WISC, you took the adult version of the WISC, right?
Right, the waist.
Yes. So on the WISC, like they can only ask a question once. And let's say that the question is testing like verbal spatial. Then it might be like, pick up the horse that's next to the orange hay barrel and put it on top of the barn by the green tree.
Yep.
And okay, so like that's how she described it to me. And she's like, but that's also testing your receptive language. It's testing your ability to follow multi-step directions. And like for kids with Down syndrome, it could be testing how long you can sit in a chair and whether you can tolerate the light that's buzzing above you and so many other factors relative to your sensory profile, your physical profile, etc. If that, so what she was saying is if you could standardize it and be like, okay, Louisa, guess what? Every time you pick, even if you need like major behavior stuff, like pick up the horse, cool, you get a dot on your behavior chart. Now, yeah, put the horse, if you could break it into things, then you would get a good idea. And
Right, but it's testing your ability to follow, like, the short-term memory needed to follow multi-step directions.
but so that would render a score for your working memory and for your visual spatial if we're testing like everywhere a mouse goes. Like well, not to mention like prepositions, right? Like you have to know the prepositions in order to show that you've got the visual spatial capacity to put the thing where it's supposed to go. And I don't even remember what I just said to pick up.
Yeah, right, I mean, this is a good point because, like, this is one of the things as a non-psychologist baffles me about this is the idea that human behavior and particularities and specific aspects of human behavior can be isolated, right? Like when you're dealing with humans and human behavior, how are you ever going to test one thing at a
Right.
time? right? Like it's so incredibly messy. And like I was thinking about how I wrote this part into the book where Louisa a part of an IQ test she was being given was to it was about following directions, and the test administrator asked her to like stand on one foot for a minute or something, and she was supposed to be completely quiet. And the test administrator like coughs, and Louisa's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "That's my girl. You weren't supposed to say anything, but you wanted to know if she was okay." And I'm okay with that. Like,
I loved that. I loved that. In fact, when I was talking about EQ, I almost said that. I thought it was
yeah,
you to me,
exactly.
but I remember
Yeah.
it was the administrator. Yeah, and so, it can also capture great stuff. Like, that's a tip. When you're reading that evaluation report, I put a smiley face on stuff like that. And then if they insist on droning on and reading it to you, then I'm like, oh, I got a smiley face there. That's my girl. And like, that helps to celebrate. 'Cause 9 times out of 10, that smiley face will generate another story where the teacher's like, oh my gosh, this kid had a runny nose and Louisa was getting him tissues all the time.
Yeah.
So then,
Yep. Yep.
and I think that's another way to make it strength-based, because we have to celebrate those things. That means so much more to me than some stupid number. Yet at the moment, we have to acknowledge that the number gets us eligible for services that we do in fact need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, another thing that I learned was the way in which IQ tests actually don't provide a lot of nuanced information for the lower end of the scores, right? So in the way that I understood this that made it clear to me, a layperson, was, the way like you get grades in school, anything below a 60 is an F, right? Like there's no distinction
Right.
between a 20 and a 60. It's all failure. Um
Okay.
yeah, but then like the other scores, there's a great deal of nuance about those. Like there's nothing called an F plus or an F
Yeah.
minus, right? So it's the same thing where like the system of intelligence testing is not set up to give a lot of nuance about people that score on the lower end of the test, because like when it was set up, all they wanted to do was just know the score and then segregate them out of like public education and hopefully, as they thought, eventually into institutions. So like that, I've learned from psychologists that kind of bias is still there, and there are psychologists like at Cincinnati Children's that are kind of working to change that about IQ tests, that they could actually give us um, valid and valuable information about people that are scoring lower, which to me is like, when you usually don't take an IQ test unless you're on the periphery, right? Like
Right.
either if someone thinks you're gifted
Yeah.
or you have an intellectual disability. But like that's those are actually the identities where you don't learn a lot
Mhm.
about a person through an intelligence test.
I agree entirely. So one of your I have two last questions. One of your descriptions, I love how you bounce from like super rich research and history to modern day. And we hear about our girl in dance class, or we hear
Thanks.
about in your beautiful small little community up there. Um, and at one point, you're at dinner with another couple, and you're kind of like describing this, and they show an incredible amount of empathy, but their experience is entirely different. Um, has your experience, not necessarily with just IQ testing, but in raising her, has it impacted the kinds of friends that you choose and the kinds of environments where you go?
Yeah, it has. And It has a lot. I mean, in some ways, it's not all that different because I think, like, once you have a kid, you start becoming you kind of find the parents of the kids that are friends with your kids, and you kind of get along with them, and they become your friends. Um, but yeah, like, I have less tolerance now for, academics who overly value intelligence in the ways that I think I used to before if I
Yeah.
hadn't had Louisa. I have, little patience for that now, the kind of, like, elitism of academics, for sure.
Me too. Yeah, for sure. I got a massage today, which if you're watching YouTube is not a mystery, or it solves a mystery as to what happened to her. Um, but um my massage therapist recommended this book. I think I put it in my Amazon cart. It's called Chop Wood, Carry Water. I think I'm gonna look at it again. Chop Wood, Carry Water. The author's name is Joshua Medcalf, M-E-D, as in David, C-A-L-F. And she said, I can't recommend it. I don't know why I'm even talking about it. But she said it's about how what we value as, I think, Americans, and how we should value more of people's characteristics and traits as opposed to their accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, but I also value people's accomplishments that are in line with their values. Like
Yeah.
I am really proud of my professional accomplishments, particularly those in the disability community, because like the work that I do with inclusive education really aligns with my values relative to inclusion. So I'm curious. She told me to listen to the audiobook because it's
Yeah.
pretty quick. I think it's told as a fable, which I usually like those.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, and I've also found it gets harder. I'm finding it gets harder, unfortunately, as Louisa gets older, just because I think kids' activities become unfortunately more competitive as kids get older. Like you can't just play soccer to want to mess around. You have to be on an elite soccer team, and you have
Yeah.
to be like it's soccer. You
Right.
can't just like enjoy playing.
Yeah.
And that creates less and less opportunities for inclusion with people with disabilities. But we have found some activities like I talk about in the book. We have this amazing dance studio in Oxford that Louisa's still taking dance, and she loves it, and she is super excited because her teacher has said, like, Louisa, if you keep working hard and strengthening your muscles, maybe you want to try point in a year or so. And it's not like, and Louisa, you're going to be a prima ballerina and it's going to
Right.
become this. It's like, you want to try it, then you can try it. Like, you should have the experience of trying it. It's not this like, and then you're going to be practicing 9 hours a day and, that craziness. It's just like,
Yeah.
your peers are starting to do this. I see that you want to do it. So you get a little bit stronger and you can try too, right? Like that is
Good
that is the
plan.
attitude I want for my kids community.
I love it. That was my last question. And what's she doing now? And she's just rocking it out.
She's a seventh grader, so like seventh grade isn't the best year I think of anyone's life. Middle school is difficult for a lot of reasons, but she's doing fine. She's doing great. I'm often amazed by what a like strong sense of self she has, and she isn't um I don't think she's affected by her peers a lot. I know she has friends and, she's doing fine, but I also know it's 7th grade and,
Yeah.
like, some kids are jerks, but she just seems to have such a sense of core self that I really
It'll carry her. Yeah. That'll really carry her. I mean, that's what we kind of lost in the pandemic for a lot of different reasons, but mainly I think autoimmunity. Like he was
Mhm.
so thick and so weak that we had to do stuff for him. And then I think he lost his confidence and his sense of self. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to build this thing back. I've got this little stack of confidence books. I've got growth mindset for teens over here and building unstoppable self-confidence for teens uh, that were recommended by his former principal from elementary school, because I think that's a really critical thing, especially when you're different. And honestly, we're all different. Um, when you're in those developmental years, like I always say, middle schoolers do a really good job at being egotistical, and that's important. It's a base of
Yeah.
development.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, we're working a lot with her on like asserting herself more and like, what do you say when someone's being a jerk and like calling you tone deaf in choir or something? You tell them to mind their own business, right? You
I
know, just
love it.
sticking up for herself like any 12-year-old should.
That's done. Pepper, you are such a gift to our community. Tell everybody where they can find the book, A Measure of Intelligence, One Mother's Reckoning with the IQ Test.
Yeah, so you can get the book anywhere that you get your books. It's at Joseph Beth bookstore in Cincinnati, I know. And I should also mention there's a book festival in downtown Cincinnati called Books by the Banks. That's in November 16th that I am going to be at, and I am looking forward to it. And if any of you yeah, November 16th. If any of you, are gonna be there, I would love to see you.
I'm checking my calendar.
Thanks,
I
Ashley.
think
Thanks
I'm
so
going
much for
through.
having me today. This was just so great, and I learned a ton actually from you, so thank you.
Fine. Thank you, Pepper.
Yes.